Okay, my name is Joe Leeds, and I'm 88 years old, and I live in a retirement home run by Quakers. I've lived in Greensboro for about 40 years, and about 30 years ago, I started going to John and Janet Hampton's Rudolph Steiner reading group. I really don't know how I got interested in that. Someone invited me, and at first it seemed like a rather odd information from Rudolf Steiner, but it was fascinating. And what particularly fascinated me was Steiner's description of life between spiritual life in the spirit world between death and rebirth. And as that got a little more familiar and acceptable to me, I really became interested in it. And then out of the Hampton Reading Group, about 17 years ago, we formed something called the Sophia Center. And out of that, the Crossings Group was formed. And I think that my experience wasn't very different from that of a lot of people who got interested in the Crossings Group. In thinking more consciously about death, based on an understanding that death is not a negative negation, but a transformation from the body to the spirit. The first time I really took part in a crossing was when Ruth died. What was her last name?
Pele.
Ruth Pele, who was a member of really the Robert Sardello group. And she died in Burlington, and I was privileged to help with her body care in the hospital after she died. And that when you take part in a crossing, in any of the crossings rituals, you'll find it an extremely moving experience. And then we took turns sitting with her body in a friend's home where they kept her body for 3 days. And that was a very profound experience for me, that crossing, because I sat with her body on New Year's Eve. And I was going to go home after a while, and then I thought, what better way to spend New Year's Eve than to sit with Ruth? So I did. I sat all night with Ruth, and a friend of hers, of all of ours, named Sheridan, who was a wonderful singer. About 2 o'clock in the morning, she arrived with her harp and sang, and there was nobody there but me and Sheridan and Ruth. And Sheridan sang for about an hour or more, and then she took her harp and went home. So I was there alone with Ruth's body. And I was thinking about Steiner's teachings, and what I thought was, he talks about the etheric body leaving the physical body and the astral body leaving. And I was wondering very intently what Ruth's experience was at that point. And if you knew Ruth, she was one of the most straightforward people and outspoken people you would ever know. And all of a sudden, I didn't see her with my eyes or hear her with my ears, but it was as though her presence was there right in front of me. And her message to me was, why are you working so hard at this, Joe? I knew where I was when I was in my body, and I know where I am now. And it was the most amazing experience. that convinced me beyond any doubt about the life of the spirit after the body dies. So that was a very wonderful time for me. After that, I also was privileged to be at the crossing of John and Janet, but I did not participate in their body preparation. I did sit and read with them. And when John Boyd, Judy's husband, died, I had another experience, which was that I went with Judy to visit him when he was in a memory care facility. And then again when he was in a hospice care, a very wonderful hospice care facility. And for a couple of months or so, I went once a week with Judy to visit him. So that was another experience of taking part in somebody going toward their crossing. And also sitting and reading with John when he was in Judy's home for 3 days. So those are my experiences. Also, I've been a member of the Crossings group from the beginning. And in planning my own crossing, Sandy reminded me that it would be important to meet with my children, so we did. Sandy came and we met with my 3 children and talked about the preparations for my crossing. And that was a wonderful thing to do. And I have also been writing things like my children told me they expected me to write my own obituary, so I've started on that, but I haven't finished. And writing down what I'd like for the crossing. And to finish this interview, I used to be a painter, but since I've gone partially blind and I have very poor eyesight now, I changed to writing poetry as a creative process. And I've gotten interested in reading some of the famous poets. Almost all of them wrote about death. And my 2 favorite poems are by Emily Dickinson and Robert Louis Stevenson, because they're teaching poems in a way. And they're not long, so I'll end with them. Emily Dickinson wrote this: "Death is a dialogue between the spirit and the dust. Dissolve, says death. The spirit, sir, I have another trust. Death doubts it, argues from the ground. The spirit turns away, just laying off for evidence an overcoat of clay." And what I love about Robert Louis Stevenson's, well, you'll see, this is what he wrote. "Dig me a grave and let me lie. Glad did I live and gladly die. Under a wide and starry sky," I left that line out. "Under a wide and starry sky, dig me a grave and let me lie. Glad did I live and gladly die. And I lay me down with a will, and this be the verse ye grave for me. Here he lies where he longed to be. Home is the sailor home from the sea, as the hunter home from the hill." And that, what I love in that poem is I lay me down with a will, and he's not talking about suicide. He's talking about conscious participation and positive acceptance of your own crossing to the spirit world. And that is all. Thank you.
Well, thank you.